The coffee shop sat on the corner of 15th and Pine in downtown Columbus, its windows fogged from the January cold outside. Marcus Thompson adjusted his tie, though he had already checked it twice in the car. He was 34, a software engineer who had learned long ago that first impressions were made before he ever opened his mouth. The blind date had been his sister's idea, and he had agreed only because saying no required more energy than saying yes. She was already seated when he arrived, a woman with auburn hair and pale skin, her fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug like she was holding on to something fragile. Her name was Claire, according to his sister, and she worked in non-profit administration. She looked up when he approached, and he recognized something in her eyes before she even spoke. Not fear, something closer to resignation. They exchanged the usual pleasantries. The weather, the difficulty of parking downtown, the menu options neither of them would remember. Then, somewhere between her second sip of coffee and his first, Claire lowered her voice to something barely above a whisper. "No one ever chooses me." The words hung in the air between them. Not a complaint. Not an invitation for pity. Just a truth she had carried so long it had become part of her breathing. Marcus did not offer comfort. He did not reach for her hand or fill the silence with reassurances that would evaporate before they reached her ears. Instead, he went still, the kind of stillness that comes from recognition, the kind that says, "I know this weight because I have carried it too." His response did not come from politeness. It did not come from the script society had written for moments like this, the one that demanded quick comfort and quicker exits. It came from something deeper, something that had been forged in the space between what the world expected of him and what he had actually lived. He understood what it meant to be dismissed before being heard, to walk into a room and feel the judgment settle on his shoulders like dust. As a black man in America, as a single father raising a daughter alone, he had learned the particular exhaustion of proving himself over and over to people who had already made up their minds. "I have a daughter," he said. The words were simple, unadorned. He offered no details, no photographs, no eager explanations. Just the fact itself, placed on the table like an offering. "She is 6, Claire blinked. Most men she had dated treated their children like credentials, something to be displayed and discussed at length. But Marcus mentioned his daughter the way someone might mention that they breathe. Essential, private, not up for debate. "You are the first person," she said slowly, "who did not try to fix what I just said." He shrugged, but his eyes stayed on hers. Some things cannot be fixed. They can only be understood. She felt something shift in her chest, a small unlocking she had not anticipated. For years, she had watched her own vulnerability become a weapon used against her. Men had heard her admit her fears and retreated. Or worse, they had stayed and used those fears as leverage, small cruelties dressed up as concern. But this man, this stranger with the careful eyes and the unhurried voice, had done neither. He had simply listened. And in his listening, she had felt something she had almost forgotten existed. The possibility of being seen. "Tell me more," she said, "about the feeling of being chosen last. Not because I want to compare, but because I want to understand how you have survived it." Marcus leaned back in his chair. The coffee shop hummed around them, other conversations rising and falling like distant music. He thought about his daughter, about the world she would inherit, about all the ways he tried to prepare her for battles she should never have to fight. "I learned," he said, "that the people who choose you last are often not the people who matter. The hard part is remembering that when they are the only people in the room." Claire nodded. She had spent so many years in rooms like that. Rooms where she was the afterthought, the backup plan. The one who was good enough when no one better was available. "I have always wondered," she said, "if there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something broken that everyone else could see but me." He shook his head slowly. "Nothing is wrong with you. You have just been in rooms that were not built for people like us. People like us." The phrase settled between them like a bridge. Different histories, different bodies, different wounds, but the same, bone-deep knowledge of what it meant to exist in spaces that had not made room for their existence. She asked him a question then. The first question of the evening that was not about her own pain. What is it like? Raising her alone? The question surprised him. Most people asked about the challenges, the logistics, the absence of a partner. But her question was different. She wanted to know what it felt like, the texture of his days, the weight of his love. He told her about mornings when his daughter refused to eat anything except toast cut into triangles. About evenings spent practicing spelling words while dinner burned on the stove. About the particular terror of watching her walk into her first day of kindergarten, knowing he could not protect her from everything that waited beyond those doors. "She sounds wonderful," Claire said. "She is." He paused. "And she is the reason I am careful about who I let into our lives." Claire understood. It was not a warning. It was not a rejection. It was simply the truth of a man who had learned that love meant protecting the people who depended on you, even when that protection required solitude. "I respect that," she said, "and I want you to know that I am not asking for anything, just this. Just coffee and conversation with someone who does not make me feel like a problem to be solved." The coffee grew cold between them. The afternoon light shifted through the windows, and somewhere in that ordinary space, two people who had spent their lives being overlooked began the slow work of seeing each other. The second date happened a week later, at a small Italian restaurant in the short North District, the kind of place with white tablecloths and candles that flickered against the dark windows. Marcus had suggested it, and Claire had spent an hour choosing a dress that would not seem like she was trying too hard. The waiter appeared moments after they were seated. He was young, probably a college student, with the practiced smile of someone working for tips. He looked at Claire first. "What can I get for you tonight?" She ordered the house red. Then the waiter turned to Marcus, and something in his expression shifted. Barely perceptible, but there, a slight tightening around the eyes, a question that was not quite spoken. "And for you, sir?" The honorific landed with a strange weight, as if it was being tested rather than offered. Marcus ordered the same wine, his voice steady. The waiter nodded and retreated, but not before casting one more glance at their table. A glance that seemed to measure and categorize. A black man and a white woman. Were they together? Were they supposed to be? Claire noticed. She had not expected to, but she did. The waiter had not been overtly rude. Nothing had been said that could be challenged or reported. But something had happened nonetheless. A small assessment had been made, and Marcus had been found wanting before he had spoken a single word about himself. "Does that happen often?" she asked quietly. He considered the question. More than people realize, less than it used to. He took a sip of water. "You learn to recognize the different flavors of it, the ones that are obvious, the ones that pretend to be something else." She felt a sudden wave of anger on his behalf. Anger at the waiter, at the world, at all the small cruelties that had been normalized into invisibility. But she also felt something else, a creeping awareness of her own position in this equation. She had walked through the door of this restaurant without a second thought. No one had measured her. No one had questioned her right to be here. "I am sorry," she said, knowing the words were inadequate. He shook his head. "It is not something you need to apologize for. It is just something that is." The food arrived. They ate and talked, and slowly the tension in his shoulders began to ease. But Claire could not shake what she had witnessed. The casual violence of assumption, the way Marcus had absorbed it without breaking stride, as if he had been practicing that particular form of emotional armor his entire life. Later, walking to their cars, she stopped him under a streetlight. The night air was cold, their breath visible in small clouds between them. "I want you to know," she said, "that I see it. I see what you carry, and I do not understand all of it, but I want to learn." He studied her face for a long moment. The streetlight cast shadows across his features, highlighting the lines around his eyes that spoke of years of being careful, of being measured, of being watched. "That," he said, "is more than most people ever offer." They stood there in the cold, two people from different worlds, trying to build a bridge across the space between them. It would not be easy. There were histories neither of them could rewrite, wounds neither of them could heal. But in that moment, under the pale glow of a Columbus streetlight, they decided to try. The restaurant dates continued through February. Twice a week, sometimes 3 times, when their schedules aligned. They learned each other's rhythms, the way Claire tucked her hair behind her ear when she was nervous, the way Marcus rubbed the back of his neck when he was searching for the right words. Small intimacies that accumulated like snowfall, quiet and persistent. He told her more about Zoe, his daughter. Not in the performative way Claire had seen from other single fathers. The ones who weaponized their children as proof of their goodness. Marcus spoke about Zoe the way people speak about essential things. Water, air. The reason he got up in the morning. "She loves dinosaurs," he said one evening over Thai food. "Not the cute cartoon ones, the real ones." She has corrected more than one teacher about the difference between a velociraptor and a Deinonychus. Claire laughed. "She sounds brilliant." "She is." His voice carried a weight that went beyond pride. "She is also growing up in a world that will not always see her brilliance. A world that might see her skin before her mind, her gender before her achievements." Claire felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the awareness of how much she did not, could not, fully understand. She had grown up invisible in different ways, overlooked by parents who preferred her louder siblings, passed over by romantic interests who wanted someone more exciting. But her invisibility had been a personal wound, not a systemic one. "How do you prepare her?" she asked. "For all of it?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. The restaurant buzzed with conversation around them, but they existed in their own small pocket of stillness. "I tell her the truth," he said finally. "That she is worthy of love and respect, even when the world forgets to give it. That she should never let anyone make her feel small, that her voice matters, even when others try to silence it." He paused, and Claire saw something vulnerable flicker across his face, a crack in the careful composure he maintained with such practiced ease. "But mostly," he continued, "I try to be the example. I try to show her what it looks like to stand tall in a world that wants you to bend." Claire reached across the table and touched his hand. It was the first time she had initiated physical contact. His skin was warm beneath her fingers, and she felt him tense momentarily before relaxing into the touch. "She is lucky to have you," she said. He shook his head. "I am lucky to have her. She saved me, in ways I cannot even explain. After her mother left, Zoe was the only reason I kept going, the only reason I believed life could still hold something good." The confession hung between them, raw and unguarded. Claire understood then that she was not just dating a man. She was being invited into a world that had been carefully constructed to protect something precious. A world that did not open easily to strangers. "I want to be careful," she said. "I know that whatever happens between us affects more than just us." Marcus studied her face, searching for something. Sincerity, perhaps, or the early signs of retreat that he had learned to recognize in others. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly why I am still here." Claire understood what he meant. Most people, when confronted with the complexity of his life, found reasons to leave. The daughter was too much responsibility. The racial dynamics were too complicated. The baggage was too heavy. But Claire had not flinched. She had not made excuses or backed away. She had simply acknowledged the weight and asked how she could help carry it. The weeks passed. They developed routines. Coffee on Tuesday mornings before work, dinner on Friday nights at a rotating selection of restaurants, long phone calls on Sunday evenings while Zoe slept and the house settled into silence. But they had not yet crossed the threshold into his home. Claire understood this without being told. Marcus's house was sacred space, protected territory. Zoe lived there, and Zoe's world could not be disrupted by someone who might not stay. Claire had dated single fathers before. She knew the way some of them used their children as shields, introducing new partners too quickly, then blaming the children when relationships failed. But Marcus was different. His caution was not manipulation, it was protection, and Claire respected him more for it. Then, in late March, something shifted. She had been helping him carry groceries from his car. A spontaneous offer after they had run into each other at the Kroger on East Broad Street. The bags were heavy, and it seemed foolish to make him struggle alone when she was right there. "Just to the porch," he said. "You do not have to come inside." She nodded, understanding. But as they climbed the steps, the front door opened. A small face appeared in the gap, dark eyes, braids adorned with purple beads, a gap-toothed smile that faltered when she saw the stranger standing next to her father. "Daddy?" Zoe's voice was cautious, tinged with the wariness of a child who had learned to be careful. "Who is that?" Marcus set down the groceries. "This is Claire. She is my friend." Claire crouched down to Zoe's level, keeping a careful distance. She knew better than to overwhelm a cautious child with false enthusiasm. "Hi, Zoe. Your dad has told me a lot about you. I hear you know everything about dinosaurs." The little girl's eyes narrowed, assessing. She was measuring Claire the way her father measured the world, looking for threats that might not be immediately visible. "What is the biggest dinosaur ever?" The question was a test. Claire smiled. "I think it was an Argentinosaurus." "But you probably know more than I do." Zoe considered this for a moment. Then, without another word, she turned and disappeared back into the house. The door remained slightly open, a sliver of light spilling onto the porch. Marcus exhaled slowly. She is cautious. She has every right to be. He looked at Claire with something that might have been gratitude, something that might have been the beginning of trust. "Thank you for not pushing." Claire stood up, brushing off her knees. "I meant what I said before. I know this is not just about us. Whatever happens, I will follow your lead." They stood on the porch as the evening light faded. Somewhere inside, Zoe was watching television, the sound of cartoon voices drifting through the cracked door. Marcus made no move to invite Claire inside, and she made no move to ask. But something had happened. A door had opened, literally and figuratively. Not an invitation, just a glimpse, a possibility that had not existed before. As Claire walked back to her car, she felt the weight of what she had seen. A father who loved his daughter so fiercely that he had built walls around her, protecting her from anyone who might bring harm. A little girl who had learned to be wary of the world before she even understood why. Claire got in her car and sat for a moment in the darkness. She thought about all the times she had been the one on the outside, pressing her face against windows that would never open for her. She thought about how easy it would be to demand more, to push for access, to assert her place in Marcus's life. Instead, she started the engine and drove away. Because she had learned something about love in these past months, something she had never understood before. Real love was not about being chosen, it was about being patient enough to earn the choice. Spring arrived in Columbus with its usual unpredictability. One day warm, the next cold, the trees unable to decide whether to bloom or hold back. Marcus and Claire had settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable, if not quite defined. They were something more than friends, something less than partners. A space between categories that neither of them felt compelled to name. Then, on a Saturday in late April, Marcus took Claire to the farmer's market at North Market. It was crowded with families, couples, groups of friends. The air smelled like fresh bread and grilled corn. They walked side by side, not touching, picking through vegetables and sampling cheese. A woman approached them near the flower stall. She was in her 50s, white, with the kind of carefully maintained appearance that suggested regular appointments at expensive salons. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were calculating. "Excuse me," she said, looking directly at Claire. "Do you know if they have organic kale?" Claire blinked. "I am sorry. I do not work here." The woman looked confused, then embarrassed. "Oh." She glanced at Marcus, then back at Claire, and something shifted in her expression. The realization of her mistake, the recalibration of assumptions. "I just assumed." She walked away quickly, leaving the assumption hanging in the air like a bad smell. She had seen a white woman standing next to a black man and had concluded that Claire must be an employee, that this couple could not possibly be together. Marcus said nothing. His face remained neutral, controlled. The mask he wore in public, the one that protected him from the 1,000 small cuts of daily life. But Claire saw the tension in his jaw, the slight stiffening of his shoulders. "That was unbelievable," Claire said. He shrugged. It was entirely believable. "That is the problem." They continued walking, but the easy mood had evaporated. Claire found herself looking at the crowds differently now, noticing who looked at them, noticing who looked away, noticing the small double takes, the whispered comments, the eyes that lingered too long. She had entered this relationship understanding, in an abstract way, that Marcus navigated a world she could only partially see. But this was different. This was visceral. This was watching someone she cared about be diminished by a stranger's assumption. "Has that happened before?" she asked quietly. "With other people you have dated?" He nodded. "Once, a woman ended things because her family could not accept it. Another time, a waitress asked if we wanted separate checks before we even ordered. And there have been looks. Comments. The kind of things people think are subtle but never are." Claire felt sick. "How do you stand it?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. The morning light caught his face, illuminating the lines around his eyes that told the story of years lived carefully, measured against the expectations of others. "I stand it," he said, "because I do not have a choice. This is the world I live in, the world my daughter will live in. I cannot take off my skin at the end of the day and become someone the world finds less threatening." She reached for his hand. For the first time in public, she held it. She felt him tense, then slowly relax into the contact. "I know I cannot understand all of it," she said, "but I am here, whatever that means, whatever it costs." He looked at their intertwined fingers. The contrast of skin, the visible evidence of something many people would rather not see. "Being with me," he said slowly, "means being seen differently. It means carrying something you did not ask for. People will look at you and make assumptions. Your family might not accept it. You might lose friends. Are you sure you want that?" Claire thought about all the years she had spent trying to be chosen, trying to be enough. She had shaped herself into what she thought others wanted, and still she had been passed over, ignored, left behind. But standing here, in this crowded market, holding the hand of a man who carried burdens she would never fully understand, she felt something she had not expected. She felt chosen. "Yes," she said, "I am sure." May arrived with warm rain and the first hints of summer heat. Marcus and Claire had been together for 4 months now, though together still felt like an approximation of something they had not yet named. They spent more time at his house, though Zoe remained cautious, observing Claire from a distance like a scientist studying an unfamiliar specimen. Then, on a Tuesday evening, everything changed. Marcus had planned to cook dinner. Claire was supposed to arrive at 7, but at 6:15, his phone rang. The school. Zoe had fallen on the playground and hit her head. She was conscious, talking, but they wanted him to come immediately. He called Claire from the hospital parking lot, his voice tight with controlled panic. "I cannot make dinner." Zoe fell. "We are at Nationwide Children's. She is okay, I think, but they want to run some tests." "I am coming," Claire said without hesitation, "unless you do not want me there." He hesitated for only a moment. "No. Come." She found him in the emergency room waiting area, his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. He looked up when she approached, and she saw something she had not seen before. Fear. Raw, unfiltered fear. The kind of fear that strips away every pretense and leaves only the desperate love underneath. She sat down beside him. She did not speak. She did not ask questions or offer empty reassurances. She simply placed her hand on his back and waited. 3 hours passed. Tests were run. Zoe was examined and re-examined. Finally, a doctor emerged with news that the scans were clear. A mild concussion, rest and monitoring, but she would be fine. Marcus exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding since that first phone call. Claire watched the tension drain from his shoulders, watched him return to himself. They took Zoe home at 11. She was drowsy, a bandage on her forehead, clutching a stuffed dinosaur the nurses had given her. Marcus carried her to her bedroom and tucked her in, and Claire waited in the living room, surrounded by the evidence of their lives. Children's books on the coffee table, a half-finished puzzle on the floor, photographs on the walls showing Marcus and Zoe at various ages, always smiling, always together. He emerged an hour later, looking exhausted but calmer. He sank onto the couch beside Claire. "Thank you," he said, "for being here. Where else would I be?" He turned to look at her, and in his eyes she saw something new. Not just gratitude, not just affection, something that looked like the beginning of real trust, the kind of trust that comes from crisis, from showing up when it matters most. "I do not let people in," he said. "Not easily, not after everything. But tonight, when I was terrified, when my whole world felt like it was falling apart, you were the person I wanted beside me." Claire felt her heart catch in her throat. She understood what he was saying, what it cost him to say it. "Marcus," she said carefully, "I need you to know something. I am not going anywhere. Not because everything is perfect, not because this is easy, but because you and Zoe are worth staying for." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand. "What if it gets harder?" he asked. "What if the world makes it harder? What if my daughter struggles to accept you? What if your family never does? Then we face it together." He looked at her with something that might have been wonder. "Most people run," he said. "When things get complicated, when they see what it really means to be with me, they run. I am not most people." The house settled into silence around them. Somewhere down the hall, Zoe slept peacefully, unaware of the conversation happening in her living room, unaware that her father was slowly, carefully, allowing someone new into their carefully protected world. Marcus squeezed Claire's hand. "Stay tonight," he said. "Not like that. Just stay. I do not want to be alone." Claire nodded. She kicked off her shoes and curled up beside him on the couch, and they sat together as the night deepened around them. No promises were made, no grand declarations were offered, but something had shifted nonetheless. For the first time, Marcus had asked her to stay, and for the first time, staying felt like enough. Summer unfolded slowly, bringing with it long evenings and the particular stillness of humid Ohio nights. Claire became a more regular presence in Marcus and Zoe's life, though she moved carefully, always aware that she was navigating territory that was not hers to claim. Zoe remained wary. She did not reject Claire outright, but she did not embrace her either. She observed from doorways, answered questions with monosyllables, retreated to her room when Claire stayed too long. Marcus assured Claire this was normal, that Zoe was simply protecting herself, but Claire could not shake the feeling that she was failing some test she did not understand. Then, one evening in late July, something happened. Marcus had gone to the grocery store, leaving Claire alone with Zoe for the first time. It had been unplanned, a simple errand that should have taken 20 minutes, but 20 minutes became 40, then an hour, as Marcus got stuck in unexpected traffic. Zoe sat on the living room floor, arranging plastic dinosaurs in elaborate formations. Claire sat on the couch, trying to look relaxed while feeling anything but. "What are they doing?" Claire asked, nodding toward the dinosaurs. Zoe did not look up. "Migrating. They are looking for a new home because their old one is not safe anymore." Claire felt something tighten in her chest. "Why is it not safe? Bad things happened there." Zoe moved a triceratops across the carpet. "They need somewhere nobody will hurt them." Claire understood, suddenly, that they were not talking about dinosaurs. She slid off the couch and sat on the floor, keeping a careful distance. "Do they find a safe place?" Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Maybe. If they are careful about who they trust." Claire nodded. "That seems smart. It is important to be careful." Zoe looked up then, her dark eyes meeting Claire's for the first time. "My mom left," she said flatly. "When I was 3. She said she would come back, but she never did." Claire felt the weight of those words settle over her, the casual devastation of a child's matter-of-fact delivery. "I am sorry, Zoe. That must have been very hard. Daddy cried a lot. But he did not leave. He stayed. He loves you very much." Zoe returned her attention to the dinosaurs, but something in her posture had softened. "Are you going to leave?" The question was direct, unflinching. The question of a child who had learned too young that people could disappear. Claire chose her words carefully. "I do not know what the future holds. Nobody does. But I can tell you that I care about your dad very much. And I think you are pretty amazing too." Zoe considered this. Then, without warning, she picked up a small velociraptor and held it out to Claire. "This one can be yours," she said, "for the migration." Claire took the dinosaur, understanding the magnitude of what had just been offered. "Thank you," she said. "I will take good care of her." When Marcus returned, 20 minutes later, he found them still on the floor, moving dinosaurs across the carpet toward an imaginary safe place. He stood in the doorway, watching, and Claire saw something in his eyes that looked like hope. That night, after Zoe was in bed, Marcus pulled Claire close. "She talked to you," he said. "Really talked. She told me about her mom. About the dinosaurs migrating." He was quiet for a moment. "She has never talked about her mom with anyone outside the family. Never." Claire understood what he was saying. A door had opened, small, tentative, but real. "I will not break her trust," Claire said. "I promise." Marcus kissed her forehead. "I know. That is why I love you." It was the first time either of them had used that word. It hung in the air between them, fragile and new. "I love you too," Claire said. The night settled around them, full of possibilities they were only beginning to understand. Fall arrived with its particular slant of light, and with it came complications Claire had anticipated but hoped to avoid. She was having lunch with her mother, a monthly obligation that always left her drained. "You are still seeing that man," her mother said, making the word sound like an accusation. "His name is Marcus." And yes, her mother stirred her iced tea with excessive attention. "People are talking, Claire. My friends at the club ask questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind of questions people ask when they see something that does not make sense to them." Claire set down her fork. "It makes sense to me." Her mother leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. "I am not saying he is a bad person. I am sure he is very nice. But think about the future. Think about the challenges you will face. Think about how hard it will be." The children would be mixed. Claire felt a cold fury rise in her chest. She thought about Marcus, about Zoe, about all the small moments of love they had built together. She thought about her mother's careful prejudice, dressed up as concern. "I love him," Claire said. "And his daughter. And I do not care what your friends think." Her mother's face hardened. "You are throwing your life away." "No." Claire stood up, placing her napkin on the table with deliberate calm. "I am finally finding it." She walked out of the restaurant and did not look back. That evening, she told Marcus what had happened. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. "I am sorry," she said. "I should have defended you sooner. I should have set boundaries years ago." He shook his head. "You defended me when it mattered. That is enough." But Claire could see the weight settling on his shoulders. Another reminder that their love existed in a world that was not always kind to it. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked. He thought about the question. "It gets different. You learn who your real people are. The ones who see you, not the color of your skin or the assumptions attached to it, and you learn to let go of the ones who cannot accept you." Claire nodded. She thought about her mother, about all the years she had spent trying to earn approval that would never come. Maybe it was time to stop reaching for something that was never there. "I choose you," she said. "I choose this life, whatever comes with it." Marcus pulled her close. "And I choose you." They held each other as the evening darkened around them. Two people who had learned, through different paths, that being chosen was not a gift that arrived fully formed. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice, until it became strong enough to withstand the storms. Christmas arrived with unexpected snow, blanketing Columbus in white and forcing everyone indoors. Marcus, Claire, and Zoe spent Christmas morning in the living room, surrounded by wrapping paper and the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the kitchen. Zoe had asked for a dinosaur encyclopedia, and Claire had found a leather-bound edition with detailed illustrations and the latest scientific discoveries. Watching the little girl's face light up as she turned the pages, Claire felt something settle in her chest, a sense of belonging she had chased her entire life. After the presents were opened and the cinnamon rolls consumed, Marcus cleared his throat. "I have one more gift," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Claire's heart stopped. She looked at him, then at Zoe, who was watching with barely contained excitement. "It is not that," Marcus said quickly, reading her expression. "Not yet. But it is something." He opened the box. Inside was a key. "It is to the house," he said. "I want you to have one, not because you have to use it, but because I want you to know that you belong here, that this is your home too, if you want it." Claire felt tears prick her eyes. She looked at Zoe, who was nodding enthusiastically. "I helped pick out the keychain," Zoe said. "It is a velociraptor, like the one you have in the migration." Claire took the key, feeling its weight in her palm. Such a small thing. Such an enormous meaning. "Thank you," she said. "Both of you." She hugged Marcus, then bent down to hug Zoe. The little girl wrapped her arms around Claire's neck and squeezed tight. "You are staying," Zoe whispered. "Right? I am staying," Claire whispered back. They spent the rest of the day playing board games and watching holiday movies. The snow continued to fall outside, sealing them in their own private world, and for the first time she could remember, Claire felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. 2 years passed. Then 3. The key to the house became unnecessary because Claire moved in, her belongings merging with theirs, until it was impossible to tell where one life ended and another began. Zoe started calling her Claire Mom, a hybrid title she had invented herself. Not quite Mom, but something close. Something that acknowledged the complicated truth of their family. There were hard days. Days when strangers stared. Days when Claire's mother sent passive-aggressive cards that went straight into the trash. Days when Marcus came home exhausted from navigating a world that still saw his skin before his soul. But there were good days too. More good days than bad. Days when Zoe brought home perfect test scores and they celebrated with ice cream. Days when Marcus and Claire cooked dinner together, dancing to music in the kitchen while Zoe rolled her eyes from the doorway. Days when Claire looked around at this life she had built and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. One evening, years after that first coffee shop meeting, Claire found herself standing at the kitchen window, watching Marcus push Zoe on the swing in the backyard. The setting sun painted everything gold, She thought about that blind date, about the woman she had been then, so convinced that no one would ever choose her, so certain that she was destined to be left behind. She thought about Marcus, about all the ways he had taught her what it meant to be truly seen, not despite her flaws, but because of them. Not in spite of her fears, but alongside them. He looked up and caught her watching, smiled that smile she had fallen in love with, waved for her to come outside. She walked out into the evening light. Zoe jumped off the swing and ran to her, grabbing her hand, pulling her toward some new discovery in the garden. And Claire understood, finally, what she had spent her whole life searching for. Being chosen was not about being rescued. It was not about someone swooping in and declaring you worthy. It was about showing up, day after day, and building something together. It was about staying when things got hard. It was about choosing each other, over and over, until the choosing became as natural as breathing. She looked at Marcus, at Zoe, at this imperfect, beautiful life they had created. "No one ever chooses me," she had whispered all those years ago. But that was not true anymore. She had been chosen. And more importantly, she had learned to choose herself. The family walked together toward the house as the stars began to appear. Behind them, the swing swayed gently in the breeze. Before them, the windows glowed with the promise of home, and this time, no one was left behind.